Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tantra Beyond Sex webinar. I have myself here, Stephen Seva, and I have my beloved co-pilot, Virginia. Say hi, Virginia.
Hi, everybody.
And we are just totally thrilled to be here. We've been dreaming up this webinar for a little bit now, and we're really excited to jump into this. And we apologize for the slight technical delay that we had, and we've got it all ironed out, so we are totally good to go. So I'm really excited about that. And so a little bit about myself. I teach Tantra and sacred intimacy, and I do that via workshops. I do one-on-one coaching, and I just absolutely adore hosting these online events as well. And something that's really near and dear to my heart with my own practice and my own life, and definitely cascades into my teachings as well, is the more spiritual component of Tantra. A lot of time when we hear the word Tantra in the West, there can be a lot of misconceptions about that actually is, and what that means. And it's one of those beautiful Sanskrit words, Tantra, that has many different layers to it, and many different underlying meanings and energetic textures and qualities to that word. And we're going to be exploring the more spiritual aspect of Tantra today. And that's the piece that I hold really near and dear to my heart. We know a lot about the more westernized Neotantra that's highly sexually based, and there's a lot of magic and power in those practices. And they're a big part of my path as well. And we're going to be exploring a little bit deeper of a depth today and going into the more spiritual component of Tantra. And so for me, if I could just give you one quick hit about what that means to me, it's the part of Tantra that creates long-lasting spiritual transformation. It's the part of Tantra that really creates long-lasting changes in the way that we view reality and experience the world around us every day. And so that's my quick hit, and I'm going to welcome Virginia into the introductions.
Thank you. Beautiful intro, Stephen. Yeah, so for those that don't know me, my name's Virginia Preston, and I'm trained as a psychotherapist as well. I teach yoga and meditation and sacred intimacy, or tantric yoga practices. And I'm based in Kelowna, BC, so teaching in the Okanagan and the Kootenays, sometimes at the coast. And yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. When Stephen and I got together and started kind of collaborating on what we wanted to speak about on this first webinar, this topic was a real hit for both of us. I would say the spiritual experience of Tantra beyond the sexuality components, that was what drew me into Tantra in the first place. And then it sort of, the other types of practices, sexual and other, kind of came afterwards. So my heart was really with the spiritual potential and the consciousness expansion, the healing, the spiritual realization potential of right and left-hand Tantra, meaning sexual and non-sexual practices. So in the work that I do individual and couples coaching and consulting. And I also teach weekend workshops, and I teach shorter kind of micro length workshops as well. And this is my first webinar. Woohoo! So we can thank Stephen for his technological wizardry and guidance with that part of things. So thank you so much. Yeah, and our the first thing that we kind of wanted to speak about is Tantra and the consciousness of oneness. Like when I give a workshop or I talk about this subject with people, one of the first things that I always want to communicate about is the big picture of Tantra from a consciousness or a spiritual perspective. So I always want to start there. I feel like that's integrity-based teaching for me, and really how I speak about that is consciousness of oneness and duality. So we could say God is one and God is also three, right? In Tantra, so we're acknowledging the consciousness of oneness that is, without question, that underlies the whole reality and from which all relative experience is born of. And simultaneously, there is obviously on the relative level duality. So there is the yin and the yang, the plus and the minus, in Tantra we would say the Shiva or the Shakti element, the sun, the moon, the masculine, the feminine. That is evident to us as we move through our daily lives. So Tantra says a big yes to both of those things, includes both. And to me, that answered so many questions for me spiritually when I started to become more exposed to this path. It just made a lot of things make sense to me. So Tantra is when I speak about it, I like to say that it's a system that uses duality or uses polarity skillfully. So it doesn't deny the relative world. And actually through a big yes, a big skillful yes to the relative world, we actually can experience the consciousness of oneness much more. So, it could be said that the average person isn't consciously resting in oneness all day long, every day, right? If they were, it could be argued that maybe they don't need Tantra. And by saying yes to duality, that perhaps gives more people an access point to practices that can take them into higher states of consciousness, because we are more versed in duality, in a sense. In our kind of waking state consciousness, we're more aware of relativity and duality. So that's kind of, when I first studied with Tantra teachers, I did a sacred femininity, tantric femininity training in Thailand. And one of the first questions that the teacher, and she's been teaching for 25 or 30 years, one of the first questions she answered was like, why practice Tantra, right? If the consciousness of oneness exists, why not just go directly there? And her answer I thought was beautiful, in that duality when its potential is realized and kind of artfully realized, can be a beautiful catapult into the consciousness of oneness, and just makes our relative experience much more lovely and joyful and blissful, and experiencing the feeling of freedom and expansion. So why not maximize what we can experience through duality and then go beyond it? So that's kind of one of the first aspects that I want to make as clear as I can to people, is that yes to oneness and yes to two-ness, essentially. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Stephen?
I just unmuted my microphone so I could jump in and tag in, so we're in sync. Yeah, for me, the experience of oneness comes from living this inner experience. It's hard to talk about, it's hard to language, and particularly it's difficult to intellectualize, because what I'm not pointing to something that you can study and sort of like gain intellectual understanding of. It's more of like an experience that blossoms naturally inside of us, and as soon as that experience happens, it's like this, like, whoa, yeah. And that experience of oneness, like, a story's coming up for me, and I wasn't going to share it because it's not exactly Tantra related, but it's perfectly Tantra related at the same time. So I was in Hawaii recently, and I was hiking at a sacred site on the Big Island, a particular place on the island. It's a very well-known mountain called Mauna Kea, and there's in ancient times up until present, there's been so many spiritual ceremonies there, and it's just been a Hawaiian hotspot of ancient Hawaiian cultural spiritual activity. And when I was there, I was having this interaction with a Hawaiian kahuna, which is a spiritual leader or a chief. And I was having this interaction with this Hawaiian kahuna, and he asked me, and he says, "Look at the plant. What do you see?" And I look at the plant, and I knew he was asking me a really deep question, but I looked at the plant, and so I answered that at a human level. I said, "I see a beautiful green, pretty leafed little plant." And he looks at me and he says, "What do you really see?" And I knew he was asking me a deeper depth, and I was looking at it, and the Hawaiian word aloha, which means hello, goodbye, I love you. It's a celebration and a cherishing of a moment or a cherishing of a person, like saying it's such a versatile word. And it also points to the energy of the divine as well, like this pure, loving, warm, giving, massively beautiful and intelligent, unconditional love energy. And I was looking at this plant after he asked me again, and I said, I see aloha. I see the breath of life within that. And like the breath of life, meaning the energy that activates all of existence. It grows us, it beats our heart, it grows the trees, it puts the fruit on them, it moves the comets through the universe, like this unfathomable, totally non-understandable, but totally tangible and totally experiential energy that activates all of life. And knowing that I come from that and everything else comes from that, and living in that place every day is probably like one of the, not only what he was pointing to by asking me these questions about this plant, but I realized in that moment that this is what Tantra has taught me as well. That exact inquiry that he showed me there is what Tantra has taught me, is to realize that the sacredness of the life force flooding through me, flooding through the veins of absolutely everybody, is the divine. And through this divine activation of all beings in the entire universe, that is the inherent nature of oneness, is like we all come from that. And so living in that place, like I forget who said it. I believe it was Eckhart Tolle, or it was a very prolific spiritual leader over time. He says, if you recognize the holiness in everybody, you can't hurt anything.
Yeah.
Anyways, I feel complete with my tag in. I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, very, very well said, Stephen. It's like, one of my teachers always used to say that God is found in a cup of hot chocolate. God is found in a sunset. God is found in moments of samsara or moments of struggle. God is found in moments of ecstasy, so Tantra is a means, and these are kind of fancy words, these are big words, but a means of accessing the supra mundane through the mundane, right? So through the ordinary things of life, with the right filter, with the right, when we're tuned into the right frequency on the radio station, so to speak, of consciousness, we experience this much deeper, richer, omnipresent, alive, vibrant undercurrent of reality, again, from which everything stems, right? And in my own experience, I've had very profound experiences of the consciousness of oneness, so that is quite real to me. And I've also had very, very profound experiences of the beauty of sort of the realization of the coming together of duality or polarity, the merging of two kind of seemingly opposite poles in Tantra and creating something beyond. So to me, when I have this kind of image in my mind of a triangle, right, with oneness at the top and then two-ness, it's like that. It kind of sounds like a like algebra equation or something, but in my lived experience, it's actually quite real, and the textures of each of those places, the oneness and the two-ness, also very, very tangible and real, and accessible. So it's kind of just like different ways to experience the same thing, and all of it is about coming into communion with the absolute, alignment with the absolute. So to me, I think, as someone who's always interested in psychological things and always interested in spiritual things from the time I was a child, that journey was what really drew me into Tantra. And it also answered a lot of questions that I had about sexuality and relationship, and my kind of life force energy didn't seem to want to be directed toward maybe a more conventional model of a relationship, like sex for procreation, sex for recreation. I know that's Stephen's language. And when I connected the dots, sexuality and relational intimacy for, and again, I'm crediting Stephen with this, for transformation, for awakening, for healing, I was like, oh, ding, ding, ding. Okay, that makes sense to me. That fits with me. So, yeah, so that's usually where I like to start speaking about Tantra, is to place it in a larger context spiritually. And, I would use the word spiritual interchangeably with consciousness. And one of the other things that I find really inspiring to talk about, and then of course to practice, but to first talk about, is the role of duality, of polarity, of Shiva-Shakti. So in tantric yoga, we would talk about the yin energy as the Shakti energy, and we would talk about the yang energy as the Shiva energy. Kind of neutral energies, we assign a bit of a genderization to them, knowing that all people have both the yin and the yang energies, or the yin energy and the yang consciousness within them, right? So it's like we all contain both of those aspects. And I found the kind of symbolism, the archetypes, and the actual felt sense energies of these things, way beyond an intellectual construct or concept. The energies of really communing with like the full power Shiva consciousness, like, in the form of living human men, but also experiencing that almost as a much larger ocean of consciousness that's even beyond these discrete particular forms of men that I might, encounter in my life or in Tantra workshops. And same thing with the Shakti energy, right? Like there's actually, in Tantra, we would say there is an ocean of Shakti, of eternal feminine sacred energy that exists in the universe. And every woman that we experience is a manifestation, is like a wave on the ocean of Shakti, right? It has a particular essence, a particular flavor. And in the background of that is still Shakti, right? And the same thing for the masculine, like a wave, every man is a wave on the ocean of Shiva. I heard that and my heart was just like, this is beauty, right? This is truth. So I really love to talk about that in workshops and coaching work as well, that, we start with the understanding of this transpersonal dimension of relationship and intimacy, which is, there is the Shivaic consciousness, there is the Shakti energy. Those two things are magnetically, eternally drawn to and in love with one another. They're in a constant dance with one another. And the sun, moon, plus, minus, proton, electron, man, woman that we experience on the relative level, simply kind of acting out that eternal dance of Shiva and Shakti. So, and then, the sort of more familiar language that I use is like Bob and Mary, right? So Bob as a manifestation of Shiva, Mary as a manifestation of Shakti. And through Tantra, they can learn to relate to one another beyond the level of personality, beyond the level of waking state consciousness, and they can actually start to tap into those more eternal dimensions. And the traditional tantric yogis, they were seeking to align themselves with eternal principles, with what was beyond the impermanence of the relative world, right? They wanted to align themselves with what was lasting and more true. So for me, I find that just, it's a paradigm or an understanding and an experience that I've, been exploring for probably more than a decade now. And it's still, when I talk about it, it really lights up my heart. I think it's really beautiful and powerful. And it's a major reframe for many people around human relationships. It really takes it to a different level. Yeah. Is there something that you would want to add, Stephen?
Sure. I'll just chip in just for a moment here. And I'm just going to go into a couple neo-tantric practices and so what I mean by Neo-Tantra, for those that don't know, is Neo-Tantra is the name that's given to the more westernized approach to Tantra, which has an extra emphasis on the sexual piece. And so the word neo itself, Neo, means the new and revitalized version of something. So Neo-Tantra is like this new and revitalized, more modernized version of Tantra that's quite suitable and high potency for people in the West. So there's a lot of magic in there. And if it wasn't for that path on myself in my own life, then I wouldn't be where I am today in this chair, even having this dialogue. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that, but I mean, like, there's all these surface level practices in Neo-Tantra, like men learning how to experience ejaculation control and multiple orgasms and circulating energy in the body, and doing these practices that really connect lovers together to have a better sex life. And that's one of the reasons why I honestly will truthfully say started studying Tantra in the first place, is this idea that I could learn how to control my ejaculation. And now that's like such a quiet voice in the tantric world in my inner environment, because I'm realizing that all of those practices walked me to an experience. They held my hand to get me to this experience of understanding that the relational act of and I'll just, to make this black and white, use man and woman as an example, but of course the tantric practices and philosophies can be done in any type of relationship: single, celibate, multiple partner, monogamous partnerships, any variety, of genders and relationship models. And so when a man and woman, like I said, I'm going to make this black and white and use this as an example. When a man and woman engage together in tantric lovemaking, it's designed to give people not a physical level satisfaction experience. It's designed to give people a spiritual experience. It's a technology to help people tap in to the sacred, to experience the divine in their body. And when two lovers come together to meet, and their lovemaking becomes beyond like really mind-blowing ecstatic sex to a total celebration, like a ritualistic celebration of the dance of Shiva and Shakti, the ultimate dance of the cosmos. That's what tantric lovemaking is. It's a celebration. It's a human enactment of the ultimate dance of the cosmos. And that's the giving Shiva masculine yang polarity, and the yin bringing inward, receiving Shakti feminine polarity. It's that dance between the giving and receiving of energy happens all pervadingly throughout the universe. And you've listed a few examples already. And so not only does our lovemaking become a celebration of the ultimate dance of the cosmos, but our entire life becomes a celebration of the ultimate dance of the cosmos. I mean, like, even me speaking is a masculine yang polarity, because I'm giving, that there's like this outward projecting giving of something. And you listening as a listener are in the Shakti feminine yin polarity, bringing it inward and like receiving. So even a conversation is highly tantric if we allow ourselves the consciousness to have that experience and be aware of it. By consciousness, I mean awareness. And when we're aware that a dialogue, even just like a mere conversation about like, how's the weather, something that's like totally mundane, can become something that's so holy in our inner experience. And so this is what I'm talking about, the way this is what I mean when I say that tantra changes the way that we perceive reality. And like, as you said earlier, Virginia, it transforms our reality from something that's mundane into something that's like cosmically profound. And it's found in like some of the most mundane experiences, like talking about the weather.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I loved how you spoke about that, Stephen, about the kind of the dance of Shiva and Shakti, and how that can show up in conscious intimacy, certainly inclusive of lovemaking and beyond, right? Like, there are many practices for deep, profound relational intimacy in Tantra that don't necessarily have to be sexual, and we don't even necessarily need a partner for that, because considering that all of us contain both of those polarities within us, actually, if we think about the sexual experience, it could be even more accurately said that when we make love with another person, it's actually our own inner Shiva and our own inner Shakti coming into communion with one another. And our partner is simply an inspiration, a catalyst, a support, a beautiful reflection and mirror for us. But it's actually our own inner duality, inner polarity that's coming into a communion or a union, right? So it's like, it's really quite deep, beautiful, rich layers of experience that we can have. And I also really appreciated how you spoke about Neotantric practices as well, right? That as in regular, my background being more in yoga, in yoga, we would talk about different levels of practice, right? We would talk about certain dietary prescriptions, maybe, or certain lifestyle practices. People would do asana, they would do postures, they would do pranayam, they would do meditation, right? All on kind of a, what would you say, like a developmental arc toward higher states of consciousness, right? Practices that support higher states of consciousness. And really, the yoga of intimacy is very similar, right? That there's certain things that we do technically and how-tos and certainly in the beginning, and that maybe are the things that draw us into Tantra. And yet, I think or certainly for myself anyway, there was a much deeper longing there for a real communion with the absolute, right? So I would say that that in the same way that asana can we use asana until perhaps we don't need asana anymore, right? There are practices in Tantra as well that we use as supports until we're more stabilized in expansive states of consciousness and understanding. And then maybe some of those practices fall away, right? Because they're not required in the same way anymore. And really the heart of the tantric intimacy practices for me is sexuality, intimacy, heart-centered intimacy, relational intimacy with myself and with others as a prayer. This is like a form of prayer, actually. Celebration and prayer and a direct interface with, what I would call God or spirit or the divine, right? And it is so deeply nourishing and satisfying and pure, beautiful, right? It's hard to even language it almost. And so the fact that potential exists, among human beings is incredible. And, for me, I like to, I like to think about how these things can be practiced on a day-to-day level, right? It's like Eckhart Tolle would talk about how, and probably many people are familiar with the teachings and writings of Eckhart Tolle. He would say that, you can move about your daily life tuned into the level of form, right? So kind of waking state consciousness, doingness form, or you can kind of adjust the frequency on your radio station, consciousness radio station, so to speak, and tune into the level of beingness, right? The level of stillness. And that's just a choice in where we place our attention, right? And it's the same thing with the application of something like the perception of Shivaic consciousness and the perception of the Shakti energy on a more transpersonal level, right? So I can be interacting with someone who's bringing my groceries through at the grocery store, and I can choose to evoke the Shakti energy. In this case, it might be a woman, the Shakti energy that is inherently kind of emanating from her being. It's just a matter of whether my eyes and my ears and my senses are tuned in to perceive that, right? So in that way, and when Stephen and I were discussing this webinar topic, at one point he said, he spoke about the body as a conduit through which we can experience the divine, right? On the earth plane, and experiencing heaven on earth, so to speak. And so it's profound to realize how much actualization of that is already here, already now. And it's just waiting for us to skillfully, to see with the right eyes, to skillfully relate with the relative world, and the divine appears, it's revealed, right? So it's like, I think it was Rumi that said, do not suffer, God is here, or something. It's here now. It can never not be here now, right? So Tantra just gives us the tools and the practices to reveal that to ourselves and come home to ourselves in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Virginia.
Thank you.
I'd love to speak to the piece about you. Something you mentioned was the practical application of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really enjoy this quality that I call living in meditation. And so one thing that my tantric practices taught me is to treat, and going back into my neo-tantric experiences, is that intimacy has taught me that intimacy can be a meditation and a prayer, as you've mentioned. But not only can intimacy be a prayer and meditation, but any type of experience can be a meditation. And just to kind of help me illustrate my point, I'm going to bring up a slide that I have queued up. And so this is a slide of my face cuddling up against a plumeria in Hawaii. And so this isn't just merely me smelling a flower. There's actually something really profound happening in this picture. There's this, number one, my eyes are closed and I've completely blocked off all of my senses except for my sense of smell. And I'm going, my consciousness is pointed so deeply into the sense of smell that it's almost as if every other sense just kind of goes away. And so I'm hyper focused and concentrated. And another way of saying that, my mind is totally still, present, and focused. Meditation qualities. Zeroing in on this beautiful magic that this flower is offering me. And so to relate that to a practical application is all of life can become this meditation that teaches and trains us to have such deep reverence for the sacredness of the ground that we walk on. And so just to share with what's happening in my inner space at a little bit deeper, so everybody who's in attendance here and watching can have this experience as well, and just try this on, is quite literally anything can become a meditation as long as you're present and your mind is still. And so this is also relates to what Virginia was saying earlier about the oneness and the duality inherent within tantric practices. So here I am in the human body in this photo, my consciousness rooted in this human body, and here's this flower, which is this beautiful magical expression of the divinity that exists in the universe. The divine force of the universe this is two seemingly separate things that are emanations of that thing. And so in my body, my mind's totally still, zeroing in on the scent of this flower. And the way that I'm breathing this flower in, I'm not just like giving it like this like kind of like short little kind of like a whiff. It's more like a completely exhale and completely inhale this flower's scent, but its essence as well into my whole body. Like there's this quality, like this flower is making love to my soul. Mm-hmm. And so it's experiences like this that have trained me over time to live in this place where there's this seemingly unending stream of divine and sacred acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. And so such is the magic of tantric flower smelling, or as I like to do in my workshops, tantric chocolate eating. You know, mm-hmm. how deep can we go into the experiences of eating chocolate and allow the chocolate to make love to our body as we're bringing it in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I jump in, Stephen?
Please.
Yeah, beautiful. You know, and in the tantric yoga tradition, really the sexual and the relational practices would comprise about 5% of all of the myriad practices that are available that allow us or guide us specifically into the kinds of experiences that Stephen just outlined with his flower communion, right? Is like the use of mantra, the use of meditation, of yantra, of sacred art, of sacred music, of sacred dance, etc., etc., etc. Many, many, many practices. So many aesthetic tools, so to speak, that were used and are still used by tantric yoga practitioners that put us in that resonance that allows us to experience really very minimal or no separation, so to speak, between ourselves and the environment around us, right? So it's like, as a woman, for example, or I'm representing in a female body in this lifetime, and so having a latent Shiva, and a more kind of predominant Shakti energy. And so, I am able through Tantra to actually, or through Tantric practices, and that sensibility to actually experience Shivaic consciousness without a body, right? Like Shiva without a body, just the formless, eternal Shiva in the absence. I can experience that in a room by myself with no one around, right? Just through a certain kind of openness, receptivity, and subtle perception that is there. And just in the usual, we might call it, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, in maybe the denseness of the more waking state consciousness, where we are more identified purely at the level of form. Those subtleties, some of those subtleties, and those other dimensions can seem lost to us. So really, again, Tantra is a means to reclaim what is already here, already now, and kind of just waiting to be discovered in the way that Stephen did in that photo with the flower. It's like you can commune with a tree, you can meditate with the consciousness of a tree, and I've done those kinds of similar practices in for years. I did a lot of experiential outdoor education, First Nations, ceremonial and spiritual practices, vision quests, these kinds of things, and would meditate with the consciousness of different plants and trees, and actually have literally a communion, a communication of the essence of that consciousness, right? Like nature can actually tell you about itself, right? If you listen in a certain way. So just think of how that applies then to ourselves, our own Shiva-Shakti nature, that in our partners and people around us, like how deeply we can go into intimate communion, to quote David Data. Didn't mean to, but it just came out. How deeply we can go into intimate communion with another person, right? That's just, there's such a richness there. Yeah.
I'll tag in.
Yeah.
I saw that look in your eye.
It's time.
So, the word Tantra, I want to just explore a little bit about what the word Tantra means in just a little bit more depth. And like I said earlier, Tantra is one of those multifaceted words that has many underlying meanings to it. There's so many different layers to it, and such is the artistic nature of the Sanskrit language. And so one of the layers is Tantra points to the expansion of consciousness. And another one of those layers is Tantra points to the liberation of energy. So for me, a nice harmoniously woven Tantra also means to weave. A nice harmoniously woven tantric practice has those two components. There's this quality of our consciousness is expanding, which means that our field of awareness and perception is constantly increasing. So tantric practices is a technology that helps us do that and facilitate that. And so the liberation of our energy or the Shakti experience. I mean, like the word Shakti, another Sanskrit word that has many different layers and meanings to it. The word Shakti means goddess, feminine, energy, power, creation. Like there's so many different layers to the beauty of it. And so there's this quality of our consciousness is expanding, and our energy is being liberated. And so in plain English, what that means to me, and I've created just like a quick little system that I'll share with everybody, that is like our barometer. It's our inner measurement tool for us to see just how much our consciousness is expanding and just how much our Shakti is expressing itself. And I call that the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps. So there's presence, which it relates to consciousness. So presence meaning be here now. Like how still is my mind? How razor sharp present am I all the way right now? And just feeling into how deep I want to go into that. But so yeah, so presence piece. I'll just run through the 5 Ps first. So presence, like how razor sharp are we here, right now? And how distracted are we? How much mental activity is there? One of my favorite tantric technologies is the use of mantra. In fact, I absolutely love the expression, there is no tantra without mantra. And so mantra is a practice that helps us embody a deep level of presence. It's a type of meditation where our minds are still because we're focusing on one thing, and that's singing the name of the divine in its many expressions that are the mantras. And like the vibrations, the physical level vibrations are traveling through our body at the same time. So just a quick application of tantric technology is to use mantra as a meditation to help us develop deeper presence. And in that deeper presence, the quiet mind, we see more of the true nature of reality. So there's passion. That's the other P. So presence and passion. So passion relates to Shakti. It's just like how full of vitality and zest for life are we? So that's the other barometer. So presence, passion, power. Shakti also means power. And so this is our personal power. Like how in our personal power are we? Like another way that I can language that is how comfortable are you with your yes and your no in your day-to-day life? Like just navigating the rivers of life as your own unique flow brings you. If you have something that's like a screamingly big yes for you, like can you say yes? Or if something is like maybe testing your boundaries a little bit, how can you say no? Like how embodied in your sense of personal power are you is a key barometer. So presence, passion, power, pleasure. And pleasure relates to presence, because if we're up in our heads and distracted by life, like how can I won't get the optimal experience of smelling that flower. And by optimal experience, I mean like that flower smelling being a celebration of the extension of divinity that it is and letting it make love to me. And so presence, passion, pleasure, power, and purpose. And so purpose is a harmoniously woven Shiva consciousness, Shakti, creativity and power, energy, being united into a human expression. And so purpose is this quality of like having utter clarity about what our mission on life is. What are we here to do? And I so fully stand behind that. Doing tantric practices births this in one way or another. I mean, Tantra is a practice that insists that we move from living a mundane, living in mundane and mediocrity to living something that's truly exceptional and deeply profound. So such is the nature of Tantra. It activates a deeper level, a deeper standard, you could say, for lack of a better term. But tantric, what I'm saying is that tantric practices help us have the presence, the consciousness, and the power, creativity, and energy to birth a deeper expression of ourselves. And our purpose is birthed from that. I don't know anybody who's been practicing Tantra for years and years and years and works like a very mundane 9-to-5 job that they're, not really serving themselves or the world and giving their gifts in their deepest capacity. I do know a lot of people who've been practicing Tantra for years who are so deeply in their power, so creative, so passionate, so powerful, and so purpose-driven in their lives. And this is the magic of Tantra. And so the 5 Ps, I'll just review that. And I'm saying this just so you can like check yourselves and see like, how am I doing in all of these areas? How present am I? How much pleasure am I getting from my day-to-day life? Doesn't matter what it is. How purpose-driven? Sorry, where am I? Presence, passion, pleasure, power, and purpose. Did I miss one? Yeah, I think that's all of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Stephen, can I pop in? Yeah, that's, I love the 5 Ps. That's the first time I've heard you speak about that. And that's a really skillful way to talk about, I think, the benefits and the side effects, so to speak, of tantric practice, right? That as you go deeper and you connect more deeply with the absolute, the sort of power, the power of the absolute and these other eternal principles, Shiva and Shakti, that starts to infuse your humanity, right? So the body does become, the body and the personality, so to speak, do become much more of a vessel for higher order divine expression, which is very inclusive of all of those P's that you just listed. That's really great way to, it's a very practical way to understand that. Yeah. And a self-check, right? Like kind of where am I at currently in my life in these areas? Yeah. And I thought it was beautiful that you mentioned pleasure as well, passion and pleasure, because certainly, tantric practice is the celebration of the body, the celebration of the feminine, the celebration of pleasure, the celebration of beauty and bliss and ecstasy, the cultivation of those experiences, right? So it's definitely not a dry kind of yoga, sadhana, right, type practice that you would do. It's like, this is a juicy spirituality, right? So, and key things to keep in mind as we move in that is our relationship to those experiences, right? So it's like in the world and not of the world, experiencing ecstasy, beauty, bliss, personal power, freedom, all of those things, and experiencing the sort of the formless or the sort of non-attachment, a non-attached relationship to those things, or an impersonal, so to speak, relationship to those things, right? And then we're just even more available for the divine to move through us, to work through us, right? So yeah, really important points I think you're mentioning there. Do you want to lead in speaking a little bit about the shadow work element of Tantra?
Sure. Yeah, we can transfer into that.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. So this is a particular area that is really loud in my life, and I feel like it's just such an important conversation to have. And here's why. A lot of people, when they hear the word Tantra, particularly in a beginner's practice of Tantra, people hear this word and they think that it means like lighting candles and burning some incense and playing soft music and like sensual massage oils and feeding each other chocolate, and all of those are really like great and enjoyable things. And obviously I'm not gonna place any shame or judgment on those things because I do a lot of those things myself, if not all of them. And and that's totally to believe that is what Tantra is such a narrow scope. And I've heard so many reflections from people in my workshops and my friends and other people in my life that's all that Tantra is. And so I might be a little bit abrupt and assertive, and I like to kind of metaphorically shoot from the hip when I in my delivery sometimes. So I apologize if this is blunt, but shadow work is such a necessary thing to consider in Tantra. And I would say that if I would even say this. I would say this, that if there's no shadow work in your tantric practice, then your tantric practice is very incomplete. And relating back to how Virginia said earlier in the presentation is that Tantra says yes to everything. So to have this practice where we're saying yes to the candles and incense and massage oil, but we're saying no to our deepest, darkest demons that still underlie in our subconscious, we're negating a major part of the equation. And we're actually robbing ourselves of some really deep, profound personal growth. In fact, a big part of my path is to actually just go straight into the shadow. Like as soon as it's there, it's like, okay, what is that? And in my past, I've gone into suppression. I've hidden my feelings, growing up in the 20th/21st century as a man who's trying to put his best foot forward. A lot of my practice had to deal with annihilating that old masculine paradigm of like we don't feel, and like actually like creating the capacity to like speak up and like be honest and authentic with what's really happening underneath this hood that had been suppressing for years. And so now I refuse to let that take space in my body. And I found this ability to say yes to the shadow and greet it as warmly as I would greet a naked woman covered in massage oil has just been so profound. So profound. And so I'm gonna offer a book recommendation if you want to the audience who want to experience a deeper level of the shadow component of Tantra. And the book is called Rocky Horror Tantra by I believe his name is Swami Rahasya Advait. I know it's Swami Rahasya. I might have got his last name, but the Rocky Horror Tantra, and you can find his ebook online for free, I'm pretty sure, in PDF format, or you can buy the paperback version off of his website. I believe it's rockyhorrortantra.com, but a Google search will yield you your results. And so one of my favorite quotes from that book is Tantra begins at the edge of a cliff. Tantra begins at the edge of a cliff. And so there's this quality to that where jumping into this level of high consciousness and extremely profound levels of energy in the body can't not bring our shadow to the surface. And so to go this deep into a tantric practice takes a lot of courage. And another one of the things that he said is, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to get this pristinely word for word, but paraphrasing, he says, tantrikas, for the people who are worthy of such title, not title in like an egoistic kind of quality, but tantrikas, and those who are worthy of being called such, have an attitude of enlightenment or bust in this lifetime. And so that relates to this age-old tantric proverb, and that's Tantra is the fastest and most enjoyable path to enlightenment. And so there's this quality within that, just like relating to something that Virginia said earlier, and that something that she said earlier is that the human body is the bridge between heaven and earth. It is how we experience earth and how we experience heaven simultaneously. And so there's so many spiritual practices that exist that I'm thinking like a practice like Zen Buddhism come to mind. And again, not projecting anything wrong with Zen Buddhism, because I practice a lot of Zen practices myself day to day. And so there's a lot of magic there. There's also this quality to practices like Zen Buddhism, where it's not about like being in the body, it's about completely transcending the body and like achieving like ascension and like getting out of the body so we can go up into heaven or higher states of being, or however you want to language that. And it's not uncommon in these types of spiritual disciplines to like be a yogi who goes up and meditates in a cave for 30 years, completely away from life. And Tantra is the exact opposite. Tantra is about being so fully immersed in all of life. Like instead of exiting the dance to find the divine, it's about entering the dance to find the divine. And it doesn't matter what that dance is in front of us. It's every moment is our spiritual practice. And so tying this again back into shadow work and saying that Tantra says yes to everything, like something that happens in deep deeply connected sacred union relationships is that our deepest, darkest, worst demons come to the surface. And so like this is more in the couple's relational style of Tantra. And let me frame it like this. Like if you are with a partner in a deep, sacred union natured relationship, and to be in that nature of relationship, it requires you to be somewhat of a spiritual seeker on your own. And so under such umbrella, what better gift is there than a person who brings up your deepest shadows for you to look at and heal? Because those deepest shadows are the things that are blocking you from your connection to the divine day to day.
Yes. Amen. Amen, brother. Very well said. So many kind of flashes went off for me as you were speaking about that. Being trained as a psychotherapist myself, that depth work piece, I think, is just essential from a psychological perspective, and having such a inextricable connection to our capacity for consciousness expansion and growth spiritually, right? So related. And, I think it's David Data that says, in a really, really good couple relationship, your absolute worst stuff is going to come to the surface. Like that's actually a sign of a spiritually constructive relationship, versus maybe the paradigm that's more about comfort, security, kind of comfortably numb, don't challenge me, don't, like a type of relationship that is more is more in a more of a stasis, right? Versus an evolutionary kind of growth arc. So absolutely, when we cultivate tantric energies, those energies move through our system, they become animated and activated in our system, and they're a purifying force. Just like when we do a lot of yoga, purification reactions happen in the body, or in meditation, purification reactions happen in the body. That happens physically and psychologically when we practice Tantra on increasingly deep levels. So the skillful capacity around navigating that shadow material as it surfaces is also, I think, really important, and something that can be, in certain types of teachings, can be a little bit overlooked, or people maybe not equipped fully to deal with that shadow material as it comes up, right? And in the New Age, I've been trained by some teachers who are very traditional teachers who are fairly critical of the contemporary New Age spiritual kind of environments, where it is lots of, back rubs and potlucks and, like lots of light, lots of love and light, right? And lots of kind of hidden shadow, actually, that isn't being mined or transmuted in the way that it could be, and perhaps arguably should be, as we're evolving. And Tantra, for sure, not a path for the faint of heart at the higher levels, and certainly will put you in touch with the parts of you that are stuck or limited or wounded or identified with illusion, with delusion, etc. And that's all part of deeper spiritual practice, is the grittiness and the glory, right? Not one or the other, that both are needed, in fact. And I think it's Adyashanti. It was funny that you said that you quoted something similar to Tantra as an enlightenment or bust kind of program. Adyashanti is a contemporary non-dual teacher out of the US who says the same thing. He said, existence isn't playing softball, like it's playing hardball, right? So this is a wake up or bust program. So you can either lean into that, you can either say yes to that, or you can be dragged to it kicking and screaming, right? So Tantra would say, here are skillful means to say yes to the underlying imperative of the whole universe anyway, right? Say yes to it, interact with it artfully, you know? So yeah, I'm totally in resonance and in agreement with that angle of the discussion around tantric practice, because it for sure happens, and it's meant to happen. You're meant to see the places where you're immature, where you are attached, where you are falsely identified, where you are limited in your capacity to love, where you are, where you're personal, where you're really personal, and there's lots of me, mine, right? And we're meant to liberate those places so that we can align ourselves more and more and more with the absolute through these bodies, right? So that is the, in my experience, what is bringing some of the deepest contentment and the deepest fulfillment really is yes to the universal self, right? And even in the face of this so-called, and again, blunt language, but the annihilation of the false personal self, in a sense, right? And all grist for the cosmic mill. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite quotes is the treasure is in the trigger. The treasure is in the trigger. And so just to use the example of being in a really deep, sacred, union natured, intimate relationship, and like all these things are coming up for us. I'd love to offer the group a practice. It's like, okay, great. We understand that the shadow work's important. Like, now what? And so I'd love to offer a quick and tangible practice. And let me say this. Tantra is something that's happening inside of me all the time, every day. And I have this really great detection system in my body that lets me know how I'm doing with that. And that detection system is called a feeling. So how I feel in my body, and my body is just, I worship my body because of its like just the magnitude of intelligence that's happening in there. Like, it just blows my mind, which is of course incidentally and hilariously paradoxically a part of my body. But I get these signals, and I'm sure you can relate to this, and it feels like this like weird contraction type, or maybe like a pain or a stabby feeling in a certain part of my body. I know you know what I'm talking about. I know you know what I'm talking about. Like this feeling of like my heart feels tight, or my solar plexus feels tense, or I have tension in my belly. Like, I get these signals, these feelings. And so that is when I go to work. That is when my tantric practice comes in the most handy. And so what's happening in my body when I get like if someone's like rude to us on the street, like we can get a little bit triggered by that and get these physiological sensations. Or like if we're fighting with our lovers or in an argument or something like that, we get these physical level sensations. And so these physical sensations are telling us something. And what they're telling us is that we have an energy blockage in our body. Somewhere there's a kink in our body's energy system. The yogic term for that is nadi, N-A-D-I, nadi. So our nadi are our energy channels, okay? And so for those of you that know teachings that are relative to Kundalini energy rising up the spine, the Kundalini rises up the spine through two main nadi channels called the Pingala and Ida nadi. And now we're getting a little bit deeper into the yogic lingo. So let me give you a practical application of this. Is this feeling tells me that one of my energy channels is pinched off or blocked. And so there's three amazing tools that we can integrate into one harmoniously woven practice to help us clear our energy blockages in our body. And this is like such a huge important piece of Tantra for me, because doing the energy work in my body to clear my channels helps me be in my presence, passion, power, pleasure, and purpose. You know, it helps me be more ease, more present, more in my heart. And if I'm feeling like tension or contraction in the body, and I'm not all the way relaxed, then then it deteriorates the quality of my life experience. And so, and I'm sure you can relate to that in some way. So here's the practice. It incorporates the tantric values of breath, movement, and sound. Okay, so breath, movement, and sound. The practice is so simple and it is so profound. So just roll with me on this, participants, please. So just do this wherever you are right now, even if you're in front of a whole bunch of people listening on your iPhone on a public bus or something like that. You might look a little silly, and that's okay. That's okay. So it's something like this. We use our breath, and so on the breath, it's a powerful exhale. Like really place emphasis on the exhale. And so there's a movement piece. So move your body. I personally like to give my body a little bit of a shake. Okay, so breath, movement, and sound. So the sound, two quick tools about sound. And so we can use sound to move energy in our body. And so I want to support you to look at it this way, is energy flows through the path of least resistance, kind of like water flowing down a river. If there's like a big boulder in the middle of the river, it's not going to go up and over. It's going to go around and downhill, the path of least resistance. So energy travels in the same way. So if you want to move energy down and out through your root chakra in your inner channel, the inner channel that goes immediately straight up, that connects all your chakras from the center, is called the Sushumna Nadi. And so we want to send it down through our center channel. Another English language that's common in Western Tantra is the inner flute. So we send it with a low, like almost like root, like low guttural sound, like kind of thing. And if we want to move the energy up through the crown, we want to use a higher tone sound. So more like a kind of a thing. So wherever you're feeling that tension in your body, if you're feeling it in your throat, moving it all the way down through your root in your channel is going to be a little bit more difficult than moving it just up and out. Okay, so this inner energy workings using breath, movement, and sound, and when we tie all of those three together, it looks something like this. I encourage you to try that. Do it 2 or 3 times right here, right now. And so after you do this, just pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to how you feel. Do you feel a little bit more present? Do you feel a little bit more energized? You know, what do you feel? Do you feel a tangible shift in the energetic state of your body? And so I'm willing to bet that the answer is yes for that. So this practice of weaving breath, movement, and sound, that those 3 tantric values together, is so profound for helping clear those kinks that happen. And so the energy can flow freely through our body. The Shakti, the divine life force that floods through all of existence, can move through our body in a way that's effortless, harmonious, that helps us keep us in our grace and our ease, totally present and connected to our hearts.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. Thank you for that, Stephen. And I'm kind of aware of time. I would add as well that a couple of tools that I use on an ongoing basis. I love inquiry. So thought level and emotional level forms of self-inquiry, which produce disidentification from stressful or untrue thought patterns, and release from identification with stressful, disharmonious emotional states. So essentially just like other tools to produce the same kind of a similar sort of change of state. So something like the work of Byron Katie, is a tool that I use quite regularly. And there's another tool called the Sedona method, which is an emotional release technique that's done in mindfulness. And that's kind of moving back and forth between allowing and letting go, right? So, and there's myriad others. That these are things that I would use on a daily basis, ongoingly, as internal content of all kinds comes to the surface. We could say, even in the Sedona method, we would say we even want to release and let go of our so-called good feelings, right? In order to create more space and more possibility for even more, right? So it's kind of like hang on to nothing, basically. So let go, let go, let go, let go. And yeah, so those are tools that I find super useful as well. Really, really practical, really relevant for just like daily living. And then certainly these are invaluable things for practicing deeper levels of spirituality, like deeper levels of tantric practice, where we are inviting purification, we're inviting truth, we're inviting revelation, right? And so it's nice to have some tools to deal with that revelation as it happens. Yeah.
Virginia, I'd like to ask you a question. In the planning stages of this, you mentioned transfiguration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you go into that?
Sure. So transfiguration is a classic form of tantric meditation. I learned it through yoga, through the tantric yoga tradition, and the word transfiguration, or to transfigure, essentially means to allow to shine through. So to shine through, and one of the meditations that I often facilitate in workshop settings, and then certainly when I do one-to-one or couples work privately, is having, in this case, and as Stephen spoke to earlier, there is no gender codification, so to speak, in terms of women and women can practice these things together, men and men can practice these things together, men and women can practice these things together. That in the class, in a traditional kind of scenario, you would have a female person sitting with a male person and looking into each other's eyes and invoking or evoking the Shiva nature and the Shakti nature to reveal itself through the form of the person sitting in front of you. So starting with the intention to do that is enough. And then certainly people can bring in different visualizations. For a man, for example, he might bring in a visualization of a goddess or a deity or something that sort of inspires him to connect more deeply with the sacred feminine. And same thing for a woman, she might invoke certain imagery or language inside her own mind that helps her connect with the Shiva consciousness, the sacred masculine essence. And couples or two people can sit in that way for, minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes together, just looking into each other's eyes and inviting the Shiva nature to reveal itself, to inviting the Shakti nature to reveal itself. So it's essentially saying, as a woman, if I were meditating on a man as Shiva, I would be in my consciousness affirming, I know you are Shiva. I know that that's who you are. Show yourself to me, right? And so you're actually calling with your heart and your consciousness directly to that ocean of Shivaic consciousness. Reveal yourself through this form that sits in front of me, and vice versa. Men meditating on a particular woman as a manifestation of Shakti. So it's a really powerful practice. It can be done in large groups as well, where you have 20 pairings of men and women doing this in a room together, meditating in that way. And partners can change around to experience different flavors and essences of Shiva and Shakti energy, because it's like the personal dimension is there person to person, right? So if I were to meditate with 10 different men, transfiguring them as Shiva, I would experience the underlying ocean of Shivaic consciousness there, and I would also simultaneously experience the particular essence and qualities of that wave on the ocean of Shiva. So I would experience the personal dimension, so to speak, of the man sitting in front of me, and I would also experience the personal dimension. So it's really subtle, beautiful practice. And then, of course, where that goes in terms of partnered intimacy and lovemaking is you can start to bring that into lovemaking, right? So you're actually meditating on your partner in lovemaking as a manifestation of Shiva and Shakti. So through the body of your partner, you're communing with the ocean of Shiva or the ocean of Shakti, right? Which is a whole other almost unspeakable kind of experience to have. So, and transfiguration can be done as a solo practice as well. You can sit in front of a mirror, looking into your own eyes. Women could sit, men and women could sit naked in front of a mirror, full bodied, like large mirror, and just meditate on themselves as a representation, as an expression of Shiva or an expression of Shakti. These are beautiful, self-revealing, healing, consciousness expansion practices. And it does start to awaken that dimension of your being, the Shiva nature, the Shakti nature. It starts to awaken that dimension more consciously in your awareness. So it's not just an idea. You know, we might hear it said in kind of New Agey circles, oh, you know, women are referred to as goddesses a lot. You goddess, you know, kind of like it's sort of a trendy name or label or something, term, right? That we might apply to a sister, right? And to actually have the direct communion with oneself as Shakti, to look as a woman, to look in my own eyes and be able to perceive that eternal, sacred, dynamic, changing, magical, like it's huge and vast and beautiful, and it does rewire the way we experience ourselves, right? And so that's a really beautiful healing practice to do solo and or in partnered settings and in group settings. Yeah, so one of my favorites as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Do you have any stones that are left unturned for you, Virginia, in our hangout tonight?
I don't think so. I feel pretty complete. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel complete too, and I'm a big fan of acknowledging that people are like sponges and they absorb a lot, but there's also a capacity for absorption, and I feel like too much just oversaturates, and so I feel like we've said a lot tonight, and it would be nice to give people some time to process.
Agreed.
Something that I will say though is whatever golden nuggets you got out of tonight, what I would say is it's so common for people to attend a webinar or go to a workshop and then they kind of leave with this like webinar or workshop high, and then it's so common for people to sort of drop the ball on the integration component. And so your time here, it's nice that you've joined us, but like I would place extra emphasis on the integration. And so really let what we said tonight, particularly the golden nuggets that spoke to you, like marinate yourself in those, and just see how you can integrate and adopt what we've been saying immediately as of like right now, and how much in your day-to-day life over tomorrow and the next day and the day after. And if you're still doing these practices after 7 to 10 days, like that's a really good sign that you've done a good job integrating. And particularly if you're doing these like a month from now or even longer, then that's exceptional. And so I really support you to again identify what the golden nuggets are for you and see if you can start living them.
And Stephen, do we want to speak about additional sort of learning opportunities for people with either of us upcoming that would support people to kind of continue to develop?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can go ahead and you go first to that.
Okay. So mid-February in Kelowna, I'm teaching a 3-hour intro to Tantra, the yoga of intimacy, at a yoga studio here called Tandava Yoga. And that I'm really looking forward to. That's going to be a really user-friendly introduction to people of all experience levels, men and women welcome, individuals and couples welcome. And very experiential. I do enough teaching points that people kind of get some of the key messages, and then we do lots of guided experiential non-sexual practice. Also in March, it's looking like I'll return to Nelson and give a weekend Tantra workshop at the Health Collective, probably the third weekend in March. And that's going to be a Tantra 2 workshop, which is the yoga of intimacy again. So that's relational intimacy, so non-sexual. I've kind of split the teachings now into Tantra 1 and Tantra 2. So Tantra 1 being the sexual technology and kind of chakra related teachings, and then Tantra 2 being more focused on what we would call right hand Tantra or non-sexual practices, although those certainly having a really natural application to sexuality. So the Tantra 2 workshop is lots of polarity practice, lots of basic intimacy practice, transfiguration meditations, heart breath connection, that kind of thing. There's been some talk also of Victoria workshop and perhaps a Vernon workshop as well. So those are kind of in the works. And then I continue, of course, to do individual and couples work on site in Kelowna, but also by distance. So I can do work with people by Skype and phone as well. And a regular Tantra practice night is on the agenda as well for folks in Kelowna who've done some trainings with me or my teachers over the years. So, yeah.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. You're amazing, and we want more of you.
Thank you.
For myself, I'll just jump in and let you know how you can find me if you'd like to keep following about what I do. And I'll just type my website into the chat room so you can go there and sign in and check it out. And so what going to my website will afford you is you'll notice right away that you can sign up for my email list. And so if you sign up for my email list, you immediately get 2 free, really great high potency offerings that I'm giving. And one of them is the Art of Erotic Talk presentation. And you can have it either in video or audio, whatever you prefer. And you also get my multiple full body orgasms for men and women presentation, and which is self-explanatory, the technology on how to facilitate that. And you can get that in either video or audio as well. And so if you stay locked into my mailing list, you will get you'll get updates about when I add new videos to my video blog, when I do other webinars like this, and so on and so forth. So you get lots of super yummy juiciness, and it's all for free. And so additionally, I also do coaching, either one-on-one or I coach couples. And more information about that on my website. If you're interested and you like my style of teaching, you can find me there. And if you are Canadian, particularly close to Vancouver, I'm teaching a weekend-long workshop in Vancouver called Tantric, Taoist, and Shamanic Sexuality. And it's happening February 12th to February 14th. And additionally, on Saturday, February 6th in Vernon, British Columbia, I'm teaching a workshop called Intimacy for Awakening with my beloved partner, Kelsey. And what Intimacy for Awakening is it's an in-depth dive in how to skillfully and artistically navigate through a sacred union natured relationship, or a soulmate level relationship, if you want to call it that. And just how to there's going to be a lot of the shadow work component and tools and practices on how to navigate the muddy waters just as much as the clear waters. And yeah. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to add me as a friend on Facebook so we can keep in touch there as well. And I've just typed in my Facebook name for you. So if you want to add me as a friend, I encourage you to do so. Something that I would like to do is to open up the chat room for questions. So if you have a question for anything that myself said or Virginia have said, I would really, I want to evoke those now. So if it's something that Virginia said, what I would request is that you begin your question by saying, Virginia, I have a question about when you said blah, blah, blah. And just make it clear, make your questions as clear as possible for us to give you as best of an answer so we can serve you optimally. We have a comment from Ataya. He says, thank you so much. This was amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm not seeing any questions roll in. So Virginia, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the pool? for consideration?
I don't think so. I feel, I'm definitely open to receiving questions if they come. Otherwise, and then I was thinking it would probably be a good idea for me to include just information about how people can connect with me via my bio page and on Facebook, of course, and that kind of thing. So I could even include that on the Facebook event, right? As kind of a follow-up post to this offering. I can make sure that people have contact information if they'd like.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah.
If we want you, we want to find you easily.
Yeah, I know. I'm working on that. I'm working on the technological upgrades these days. Yeah.
So we have a few comments. Laura says, lovely. Thank you so much for this time and juicy discussion. Scott says, that was amazing, beauties. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we have another comment that says, really good webinar. Powerful and easy to understand teachers, you guys. And a heart symbol. Jane says, since I missed the majority of this talk, can I recapture it somewhere? And great question. And yes, the answer is yes. You will, shortly after this broadcast, get a link to your email. And that link will be your complete webinar recording video. So you get the replay for an indefinite amount of time at your disposal. We have another question that was any other book recommendations, and to answer that, for at least on my end, I'm going to post a link because I got asked this question so many times and I've had this conversation with so many people that I decided it would be a really good use of my time and energy to write a blog post about it. So I can just give you a link. And so there is my blog post link. It's my top 5 sacred intimacy related book recommendations. Virginia, do you have a book recommendation?
I similarly have a reading list, like a resource list that includes websites and book recommendations. One that I often recommend to people is Urban Tantra by Barbara Carrellis. I find it's not maybe a super traditional tantric yoga style book like some of the books that are available that those recommendations have been made by my teachers who are quite traditional. And I find that when people unless you're kind of a yogic scholarly type, that something that might be more accessible in the beginning, and depending on what your goals and interests are related to Tantra, that something like the book Urban Tantra, easy to find, easy to read, some basic theory, and then lots of practical, practice-based applications. So really outlining well different breathing practices, different partnered practices, the creation of a beginner ritual, etc. Like these. So I find that book to be quite accessible to people when they're just starting out, and isn't sort of off-putting from the yogic like scholar sort of level of things, which some of those reads can be a little dense for people, depending on their background. So yeah, Urban Tantra I like, and anything by David Data I would recommend as well. Dear Lover, The Way of the Superior Man, The Enlightened Sex Manual, Finding God Through Sex. These are all beautiful, easy to read, inspiring books. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Both Urban Tantra and Finding God Through Sex are in my top 5 list that I
posted.
posted.
Okay, nice. Yeah. We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love how new things are always being exposed to show us how just in sync we are.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I just have a question from Terry, specifically for me about the workshop in Vernon, and they're asking if it's at Tidal Elements, and yes, the answer is yes, it's at Tidal Elements. Mm-hmm. So that's for you, Terry. And I suspect your workshop, when that launches, will be at Tidal Elements too, Virginia?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the early stages right now. There have been some requests and some questions, do I go to Vernon? Would I go to Vernon, etc.? And the answer for sure is yes. So yeah, that would probably be my first contact point would be Tidal Waves Studio as well. Yeah. Or Tidal Elements. Yeah.
Great.
And I'm going to come see you there too on the 6th.
Oh, nice. Fun.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, it'll be great. You'll get to meet Kelsey in person.
Yeah. Yay.
Okay. We're not having any new questions rolling in, and moving forward, if a question is birthed post-webinar, please post it on the event page. You can search it over Facebook, Tantra Beyond Sex, and please post your questions. And to help us see them better, for better visibility, I encourage you to tag myself or Virginia in them, and we're happy to answer your questions. And Terry's saying, I signed up. How synchronistic. And it'll be nice to see you too, Virginia.
Yeah. Terry.
That's great. Perfect. It'll be nice to meet you in person, Terry. Okay. So I'm going to bring the webinar to a close. Participants, thank you so much for being here and putting the time out of your day to come join us for this, in my opinion, very important discussion. These practices are just such powerful life changers, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to share them with you. Virginia.
Yeah, thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful discussion. I think really also in agreement, really important topics in Tantra. And yeah, what a pleasure and a joy to connect with everyone in this format. It's really beautiful. So thank you for spending the time.
And that being said, we're going to end the broadcast. Aloha, everybody.